Barkley Shut Up and Jam, known as Barkley Power Dunk in Japan. Hey, if you're looking for a dollar store version of NBA Jam with way less personality, then you've found it. The game controls exactly like NBA Jam, complete with a turbo meter and high-flying dunks, but there's flaws aplenty here, like the camera being too slow to keep up with the action, and how seemingly nobody in this game can shoot. This game really isn't that bad, but I can't think of a single reason why anyone would want to play this instead of NBA Jam. Next is, oh no, do I really have to go over Bill Laimbeer's Combat Basketball again? I already did a full video on this game. It's one of my most hated ever, and please believe me when I say it's one of the worst games of the 16-bit era. Shooting is a crapshoot, passing hardly even exists, since you just throw the ball wherever without locking onto a player. It's just really, really bad. I need to move on before I have a meltdown. Next is EA Sports Bulls vs. Blazers in the NBA playoffs, the continuation of EA's basketball franchise which started on Sega Genesis with Lakers vs. Celtics. There's only 18 teams here, including 2 All-Star teams, and while this game lays a solid foundation for the series, Bulls vs. Blazers in particular has not aged well. The frame rate sucks, so the game plays very slowly, so it takes a long time to get a proper feel for shooting. You can probably avoid this game. EA tried again with the same format the next year, this time changing the name to simply NBA Showdown. This is definitely better than Bulls vs. Blazers as the frame rate picks up and the game is a little faster, but shooting still feels like a crapshoot, and you never really feel like you're in control of the game. Stuff just sort of happens whether you do anything or not. It's kind of a disappointment. And since I'm here, I might as well get into the continuation of the series, which EA renamed to NBA Live, starting with NBA Live 95. There's an NBA Live game every year through 1998. You can see obviously they switched the perspective to an isometric viewpoint. It works, but it can be frustrating to navigate. Simply passing the ball can be pretty tough. It's still very much playable and pretty accessible today though. It's pretty easy to get the timing down on shooting for a change. There's also full seasons, season stats, real teams, real players, and all sorts of additional options. One issue I have with these games though is that it takes forever to get through a game. Seriously, it takes like 45 minutes to an hour to get through a regulation length game, so you're going to want to crank the quarter length way down. The gameplay is more or less exactly the same for all 4 games, so it's hard to recommend one particular game. I should mention that the 95, 96, and 97 editions support up to 5 players, and the 98 version does not. I should also point out that none of these games feature Michael Jordan as a player due to licensing issues. Instead, he's featured as a generic roster player number whatever. Same for Charles Barkley, who doesn't show up until the 98 version on the Rockets. But yeah, you can't go wrong with any of these 4 games. The one I spent the most time with was NBA Live 96, so I can vouch for that one myself. So yeah, if you're looking to relive 90s NBA and play as guys like Sean Rooks, Sam Mitchell, and Tom Gugliotta, then NBA Live is what you're looking for. College Slam is another game that supports up to 4 players, and that might be about the only thing going for it, because once again, this is just an NBA Jam clone except with college teams. And I mean literally, the same sprites, graphics, the announcer, everything is ripped straight from NBA Jam. I guess if you want to play as your alma mater or your favorite college squad, then this game would be worth it. And I do like the touch of being able to pick from 5 anonymous dudes to make up your team, but still, why bother with this when you can just play NBA Jam? Next, we have 3 games that are only available in Japan on Super Famicom. First is Dear Boys, a story-driven basketball game involving dating and other stuff, I guess, based on a manga from around the same time frame. There is a straight-ahead exhibition basketball game mode, though, and yeah, this is pretty freaking confusing. There's no English patch that I could find, but even still, the gameplay is so odd that I'm not even sure that would help. I just wanted to point this game out. Then there's Dream Basketball Dunk and Hoop. Now this is a little more like it. No real teams or players here, but the gameplay is well done. You use the L and R buttons to switch who you want to pass to, which I really like, and it doesn't take long to get the hang of shooting. The game is very forgiving when you're near the basket too. This kind of reminds me of Dynamic Stadium, a surprisingly good baseball game that's also only for Super Famicom. You might consider this the basketball version of that game because this is a quality title, and it can also support up to 5 players. Next, there's the From TV Animation Slam Dunk series. 4 games that are all the same kind of game as Dear Boys. There's a lot of strategy here, from varied zone defenses to organizing give-and-go plays to picking your players and substituting. All of this is too hard to do without an English patch, and the action again here is predicated on these weird cutscenes anyway, so there's no flow to the gameplay. I just wanted to make sure these games were mentioned. Next, we're back in North America with Jam It. So they wanted the title to allude to the word damn it? Yeah, that's what passed for edgy back then. Anyway, this is the same people that brought you Street Hockey 95. And as lousy as that game was, I'd much rather play that than Jam It. This is awful. The characters move like they're in Pit Fighter, and shooting is so awkward. Avoid this game. It's probably one of the worst on the system. Thankfully, Looney Tunes B-Ball is one of the better games on this list, and one of the better licensed games on the Super Nintendo. This is an arcade-style 2-on-2 type game, not as ruthless as NBA Jam, but it's still pretty fun. You can collect these gems on the court so you can later buy power-ups you can use during the game, like a pie you can throw. Hey, it is Looney Tunes, what'd you expect? Anyway, this game is a lot of fun, and I had no idea Elmer Fudd could shoot from downtown like this. NBA All-Star Challenge sounds like a cool idea. It features 28 real NBA players with several game modes, including Horse, a 3-point contest, and a one-on-one tournament. But yeah, that's right, there's no team games here. It's all one-on-one stuff. That does sound like a neat idea, but unfortunately this game is lousy. For one thing, you have to press the button twice to shoot, once to jump and once to let go of the ball. Come on, every other game has you hold the button. This is a bunch of crap. Also, the sense of depth here is completely off-kilter and unpredictable. It's impossible to tell where the ball is headed on a rebound. I'd avoid this game. Then there's NBA Give and Go, developed by Konami. Now this is how you do a game from this perspective. There's a much clearer sense of depth, and the game plays much smoother as a result. This is one of the best games on this list, and I feel like it's been forgotten a bit over the years. There's a lot of gameplay modes, and the pace of play is excellent. You can get a full game in less than 20 minutes. This doesn't quite have the same kind of quote-unquote realistic feel of NBA Live, and it doesn't have all the stats those games have, but I think I'd still rather play Give and Go if I wanted a 5-on-5 basketball game on the SNES. Now we get into by far the best basketball games of the 16-bit era, the NBA Jam series. There's NBA Jam, NBA Tournament Edition, and later there's NBA Hang Time, which is a bit of an updated version with a little more true-to-life graphics. Well, true-to-life as you could get in 1996 on console. Anyway, I already did a video on these games. They're the best because they're so easy to pick up and play, and you don't even have to like basketball to enjoy insane dunks like this. Hell, the announcer phrases from these games are still used all the time today. These games are just timeless. You can't go wrong with any of the three, but my personal favorite is NBA Jam Tournament Edition because of all the extra codes and passwords to unlock extra characters. NCAA basketball is a childhood favorite of mine, so I have a tough time being objective about this one. As you can see, the Mode 7 perspective here adjusts as the ball moves, the same as NHL Stanley Cup, but it's utilized much better here because it's not as jittery. I know the blue background is weird, like they're playing on some kind of astral plane or something, but I get why they did it, and it's really not that distracting. This is one of those games you learn to love, but I can't objectively recommend it. It does at least have real colleges, plus there's little idiosyncrasies here that I love, like this Davison guy who cannot miss. Still, I have to admit, you're better off looking elsewhere. Next is NCAA Final Four basketball, the first game of the Final Four series that ended up being the go-to college basketball game on the PS1 and PS2. This is the only one to appear on Super Nintendo or Genesis, and that's a good thing because this game isn't very good. This is one of those goofy games where they tried to shoehorn the action into these cumbersome preset animations. The game looks smooth, but it definitely does not play that way. Too bad too, because there's a ton of real college teams here, but I'd avoid this game. Next we have Rap Jam Volume 1, yet another attempt to capture everyday pickup basketball on the street in video game form. And again, this one fails. This one's at least notable because it features 90s musicians like Coolio, Warren G, and Naughty by Nature, so that's pretty funny. Otherwise, this is just yet another one-on-one style game that gets real stale after about 2 minutes. Super Dunk Star is a Japan-only game that's pretty amusing, if only because of the random usage of 1970s players like Gail Goodrich and Pete Maravich. The made-up teams are pretty funny too, like the New York Yellow Cabs. But yeah, this game sucks. Stuff just sorta happens, and you seemingly do very little to influence it. It's a good case of the game playing you instead of the other way around. Next is Magic Johnson's Super Slam Dunk, and this is one of the worst games I can remember playing. Worse than Jam It. When you think of player-licensed sports games that are slapped together in the most half-assed way possible, this is your go-to example. The perspective rotation is disorienting, the action is slow and plodding, every single jump shot is blocked, and the announcer is consistently like 5 seconds behind, like he's on tape delay or something. Avoid this game.
He puts up a 20-footer.
We have another Japan-only Super Famicom game, the Subasu Yarosho 3-on-3 basketball. This is the Japanese attempt at capturing the street pickup basketball sort of thing, and again, the basic basketball physics here just aren't very good. And not only that, but to shoot, you press B to jump and A to let go of the ball. That's just awful. Avoid this game. Last, we have Tecmo Super NBA Basketball. This game is pretty good. It's got the classic Tecmo presentation you're probably used to from Tecmo Super Bowl. The basketball physics engine here is reliable, even if the ball seemingly behaves like a Nerf ball. It is at least consistent and predictable, and you get a good sense of the pacing and speed of this game very quickly. This is one of the better SNES basketball games for sure. ABC Monday Night Football, and right off the bat we have a game that does not have an NFL license, so it has made-up teams, which are pretty amusing. Selecting plays is treated like Tecmo Bowl, which is okay, although you only get 8 plays to choose from. And holy crap, is this game slow. It's like the players are running through oatmeal and the field is like 10 miles long. Passing is functional enough, but running the ball is useless. I'd avoid this one, although it's pretty hilarious when you get tackled. Let's check out a college game next with Bill Walsh College Football. I have to say I admire the attempt to make the football gameplay unique to the college game. The playbook is decidedly different from NFL games. You can run option plays or a spread offense, for example. The controls are okay, running the ball is usually effective, passing can be hit or miss, and defense can actually be fun sometimes. It doesn't have real teams, instead you get Columbus for Ohio State and Tallahassee for Florida State, that sort of thing. The thing about these EA football games though, the ones developed by Visual Concepts anyway, is that the line of scrimmage turns into a big ball of humanity every play, and passes get tipped constantly, and there's just a huge mosh pit for the ball in the air. I'll get into that more when I talk about the Madden series, but it really is annoying. But even so, this is probably the best college football game on the Super Nintendo, which isn't saying much. While this particular series continued on the Genesis, which was obviously more well known for sports games and for good reason, the Super Nintendo didn't get another game in this series until College Football USA 97, and maybe it's for a good reason because it's not very good. The controls are really slippery, so passing feels completely futile. You have to be dead on target to complete a pass, and the hit detection on defense to tackle somebody is kinda wonky. There is a create-a-player mode, so it's got that going for it, and it does have 111 real college teams, but otherwise this game just isn't as good as the Genesis games. The gameplay on the Super Nintendo just isn't as tight as it is as the first game in the series, so I'd rather play Bill Walsh College Football. Next is Capcom's MVP Football. It sure seemed like Capcom could do no wrong in the Super Nintendo era, what with Street Fighter II, Mega Man X, and the like, but this game is not near the quality of those. The controls are really goofy. The R button is the action button for everything. It snaps the ball, it selects your guy on defense, and it throws it too after using another button to select a receiver. Once you get past this goofiness, the game is not bad. The actual football stuff is pretty limited. It has real teams but not real players. There's nothing as fancy as like a no-huddle offense, but the gameplay itself has held up okay over time. We hit our first player licensed game with Emmitt Smith Football. This game has the same overhead gameplay and playbook styles as the other games you've seen so far, which by the way are all pretty much cribbed from the Madden series. Although the flow of this game overall is very slow and clunky, what makes Emmitt Smith Football stand out is that you can make up to 64 of your own plays, and since the game has a battery save, you can save your own playbook, so that's pretty cool. Another thing that stands out are the voices, which are well done. This game isn't terrible, but not good either, just average. Then there's ESPN Sunday Night NFL. This game is awful. It feels like one of those games that cared way more about presentation than the actual gameplay. The appeal at the time was seeing and hearing Chris Berman and the ESPN logo and all that, when in fact the actual gameplay here is atrocious. The graphics are terrible, and I could not feel less in control when playing here. Every pass is a balloon, and it's a total crapshoot if the guy will catch it or not. Avoid this game. Football Fury cracks me up because the game doesn't have an NFL license, but they sure tried with the teams they made up. The Minnesota Vulcans, the Green Bay Hippos. Well, close enough. This game is awful though. Another game where as a player, you just don't feel in control at all. It feels like the game is playing you more than anything else. You pick a play, you snap the ball, and stuff just sort of happens. It's a little better than ESPN Monday Night NFL, but not by much. Now we're on to the Madden series, which spanned from 1991 to 1997 on the Super Nintendo. The series had a bunch of different developers over the years: Park Place Productions for the first game, EA Canada for the 93 edition, Visual Concepts for the 2 games after that, with the remainder of the series being done by Tiburon Entertainment. I point this out because each developer brought their own strengths and weaknesses to the table. The first 2 games suffer from a bad frame rate, which really makes the games run choppy as hell, although Madden 93 has the ambulance. 94 and 95 suffer from the same problems as Bill Walsh College Football. The line of scrimmage just turns into a huge mosh pit immediately, and every other pass is tipped right when you throw it. It is really annoying, and it makes the game almost broken. Madden 96, 97, and 98 are the most playable games in this day and age. The gameplay is a bit smoother, and the plays are actually somewhat coherent. You know, like they play out as they're drawn up. Madden 97 and 98 introduces the front office stuff, like trades, into the series, but it's seriously comical how those two in particular are nearly the exact same game, with just different menus and updated rosters. But hey, if you've got a hankering for a Super Nintendo Madden game, 97 or 98 are the two to get. It literally doesn't matter which one, because they're practically identical. Let's dive back into college real quick with NCAA football. I played this game for like 30 minutes, and I don't think I completed a single pass the entire time. I don't know if I'm missing something or what, but this game is just not good. The map in the upper right corner is totally unnecessary. The playbook display takes forever to scroll through, and the teams they picked to be in this game are totally random. Just a haphazard selection of whoever, I guess. I'd avoid this game. Then there's NFL football. This game is awful, a classic case of the game playing you rather than you playing the game. Never for a second did I feel like I was in control of anything. A good part of that is because of the horrendous graphics and frame rate, but really, you just pick a play, stuff happens, and you had nothing to do with it happening. It is terrible. Now on to the NFL Quarterback Club series. There's two games here coming in 1994 and 1995. The appeal of these games are the quarterback-centric mini-games that test your accuracy, distance, and running ability, among other things. It takes a long time to get the hang of these drills, but I appreciate that these games set out to do something different. There's also a series of preset scenarios set up for you to complete, like less than 2 minutes left, need a touchdown to win. Those are pretty cool. Plus there's goofy options like picking a quarterback in addition to picking a team. So you could have Brett Favre on the Vikings, for example. Man, wouldn't that be weird? Oh, wait. The actual gameplay here is very good, clearly a Madden clone, but executed better in my opinion. Granted, there's little to no defense in this game. In fact, there's a quick D button, so you don't have to bother picking a defense. Well, it is called Quarterback Club, so that's to be expected, I guess. But every game is like 40-something to 30-something. But yeah, either NFL Quarterback Club game is very good, but the second game in the series just has a little bit more polish. We go from good to bad with Pro Quarterback. I mean, with a title as generic as that, what do you expect? The graphics are terrible, the frame rate is limited, the playbook is extremely limited, there's no real teams or players, and no reason to play this game whatsoever. Avoid this game. Sterling Sharp end-to-end. It sounds bad, that is one terrible title, and nobody remembers who Sterling Sharp was, but this game actually isn't too bad. It's a total Madden clone, although the playbooks are way more limited. The action on the field is coherent, the game flows by quickly, and they really did a nice job with isolating sprites with blocking instead of the line of scrimmage being one big mess. It's easy to pick out running lanes and follow your blocks. The only real flaw is that it's way too easy to throw an interception. I threw 3 in the first quarter alone. The passes are always picked off instead of just defended or batted down, so that's annoying. Otherwise, I really think this is a pretty good game, surprisingly enough. For a much-needed change of pace, there's Super High Impact, the only arcade-style football game for the Super Nintendo. This is as close as you'll get to a football equivalent of NBA Jam. You've got a screaming announcer, players getting destroyed, with the screen shaking on every tackle and helmets flying off. You've got play calls like suicide and you're toast. The gameplay isn't the best, it's pretty stiff, but this game is all about presentation and personality first and foremost. Maybe it's just because I got burnt out on all the other games that are starting to blend together in my head, but I enjoyed Super High Impact and would definitely recommend it.
I eat quarterbacks for breakfast.
Next is Super Play Action Football. Hey, this was developed by Nintendo, so it has to be good, right? Well, no. It's clear Nintendo had high hopes for this game. It was featured on the Super Nintendo box. What's weird about this game is that it's got the same sound font as Pilot Wings, and that really throws me off. Anyway, you can play as pro teams, college teams, or high school teams? Okay. As you can see, the gameplay here is totally different with a diagonally slanted overhead view, and the gameplay overall is really slow. Every play takes an eternity, and I hate not being able to see downfield. It makes passing practically impossible. The idea is to use the map on the left, but it's so awkward. Super Play Action Football is the rare case where Nintendo just got it completely wrong. Avoid this game. Finally, we get to the excellent Tecmo Bowl series. Real teams, real players, stats, and a ton of game modes, and classic simple gameplay with the wide side view where you can see most of the field. The gameplay is the same as the NES games, where you have 8 basic plays, but with a lot of variations. The goal on defense is to pick the same play as your opponent, and if you do that, the play is stopped in its tracks. I love this style of gameplay because the football almost becomes secondary, and you become wrapped up in the strategic element. Anyway, Tecmo Super Bowl is literally just a souped up version of the same game for NES. The second game improves the graphics and expands the playbook while keeping the gameplay intact. The third game is pretty much the same as the second game, but with a tiny bit more polish. You really can't go wrong with any of these games, but in my mind the third game is the best in the series and the best football game on the Super Nintendo. But I wouldn't blame anyone if they preferred the first game. Lastly, coming to you from the same developer that gave you Pro Quarterback, it's Troy Aikman NFL Football. This is almost the same thing as Pro Quarterback, just as limited but less generic since they at least have the real teams. The camera is zoomed out a bit and the graphics are barely a tiny bit better, so this game is playable at least. It's still total crap, but it is playable. Cal Ripken Jr. Baseball. No MLB license here, so it's all made-up teams and players except for Cal Ripken Jr. This game is just okay. The pitching is functional, the fielding is actually well done, but I played through 2 entire 9-inning games and managed only 2 hits. And it's not a matter of making contact, it's that every single time I hit the ball, it was right to someone. I do not understand that. Cal Ripken Jr. Baseball isn't bad, but you can do better. Doraki no Kasa Yakyu is Japan exclusive, as you might guess. It had a North American release scheduled under the name Zubal, but it was cancelled. And yeah, you can see how the name Zubal came about. You play as bears, cats, cows, whatever. And this game is not easy. Pitching is pretty good, fielding is fine, but it takes a lot of practice to get the timing down for hitting. Dynamic Stadium is another Japan-only game that's very good. Hitting, pitching, and fielding are all well done and easy to get the hang of, and I especially like how after the ball is hit, you can get a head start at the ball before the viewpoint switches to a wider perspective. Dynamic Stadium is a good pick-up-and-play arcade-style baseball game. ESPN Baseball Tonight is no different than any other ESPN game of the time. The big selling point is the ESPN presentation with the TV graphics and Chris Berman. The game itself sucks. Fielding is just about impossible, since the game's sense of depth is so off-kilter, and the computer AI is idiotic. Avoid this game. Extra Innings is very good. There's quite a few different game modes, like multiplayer, custom teams, an all-star game, and a pennant race. No MLB license here, but the team names are fantastic. It's the Bees versus the Winds! Pitching and fielding are intuitive, but hitting may take a little while to get right. But still, the pace of play here is outstanding. There's no wasted time, and the game zips right along. Extra Innings is worth playing for sure. It's one of the most accessible games on this list. There's a Super Famicom sequel as well, Hakunetsu Pro Yaku Ganba League, and it plays the exact same way while updating the visuals a bit. Frank Thomas, Big Hurt Baseball, right away with this intro. Wow, that looks freaking amazing, but that feeling does not last long. It is really hard to hit, mostly because of the lower camera angle, and the long pause between when you hit and when it flips to fielding mode really makes the game clunky and slows down the pace of play way down. You pick from a menu to pitch, so it's more of a simulation game from that aspect. As good as this game looks, I'd avoid this one. Hardball 3, the third game in the Hardball series for PC, is a classic case of a game that was probably pretty good in its time, but it just hasn't aged all that well. The graphics and the use of the MLB player license with a headshot of each player, that would have gone over really well in 1994, but now the game just moves too slowly and trying to pitch is ridiculous. In each game I played, I got absolutely pummeled. I don't know if that's just me or what. Hatayama Hatch no Pro Yaku News Jitsume Han. This is an example of an unbalanced game. The speed the ball travels, whether from a hit or a throw, is way too fast compared to how fast the players move. So as a result, you get a hit to the outfield and get thrown up at first by 20 feet. Avoid this game. Human baseball, as opposed to grizzly bear baseball, I guess. Here's the opposite problem from the last game. Nobody can throw, and you have no choice but to sit there as the ball rolls and rolls in from the outfield on any base hit. Avoid this game, too. Next there's Jiku Powerful Pro Yaku series, which has 6 games in total. This series is made by Konami, and early 90s Konami is always well made. Everything certainly looks great, but these games are just way too hard. I don't doubt that with enough practice you can get good, but the hitting system here, where you look up to see where the pitch is going, and then move your cursor over to it, and then swing all within nanoseconds, that's really hard to pull off consistently. So while these games are good, they are really tough. Onto the crown jewel of baseball games for the Super Nintendo, Ken Griffey Jr. presents Major League Baseball. This game gets everything right. Speed, pacing, balance, the unique art style, real teams, real stadiums, a home run derby, a full season stats, pitching, hitting, and fielding are all more than manageable. I did a full video on this a long time ago if you want to check it out for more details on this game, but for now I'll just say you can't do any better for a baseball game on the SNES than Griffey presents Major League Baseball. And that includes the next game, Ken Griffey Jr.'s Winning Run. Don't think of this game as a sequel because it isn't. It's made and developed by Rare. Winning Run is fine. The presentation and amount of game modes here are great. It's certainly playable, but hitting and pitching feel pretty stiff. Fielding is very good and the balance of speed here is well done, but I was expecting more. It's better than most of the other baseball games on this list, but it does not touch Griffey Presents Major League Baseball. The Koshien series has 3 games on the Super Famicom, and it's kind of inaccessible because the teams here are selected by region, and I don't really know what I'm doing here. The gameplay itself, once you get to it, is fine. Hitting and pitching are definitely manageable, but the fielding is lousy because you're so slow. These games are alright, but you can find better. MLBPA Baseball is EA's one and only baseball game for the Super Nintendo, and you can see why, because it's not all that great. Pitching is actually very good, hitting is functional, but fielding is a big problem. You're given very little screen real estate to work with, as the camera viewpoint zooms way in as the ball travels. Yeah, this does not work. Real players here, but no real teams. All the traditional game modes are here, but if you're going to play MLBPA Baseball, switch auto fielding on. Nolan Ryan Baseball is not at all what you'd expect. You'd think this would be your typical player licensed game, but instead it's an extra innings ripoff with anime-styled players. It's not bad, but the fielding is lousy, and none of these guys can throw more than 10 feet. I'd rather play extra innings. Pro Yaku Star is the rare game on this list that's almost too easy. Each game I played, I scored at least 4 or 5 runs in the first couple innings. Not much behind the pitching and fielding. It's easy enough. This is a decent game. Relief Pitcher appears to be the cheap generic baseball version of stuff like Pro Quarterback. It has some impressive aspects like Jack Buck doing the play-by-play, but this game is just not good. The animation is terrible, so bad to the point that you have to start your swing while the ball is still in the pitcher's hand. Avoid this game. Roger Clemens' MVP Baseball is a pretty good game with one fatal flaw. You can't get anybody out. Facing the computer is just one hit after another. I swear, the computer got at least 3 or 4 hits every single inning I played. It's a little ridiculous. Hitting and fielding are both pretty well done, and the game goes by fast, but it's kinda hard to get into a game if you can't get anybody out. Next is Sporting News Power Baseball. Pretty funny title considering that it's freaking impossible to hit in this game. The pitches are either lightning quick or incredibly slow, with no in-between, and the AI mixes it up constantly. The base runners are also comically fast, beating out every ground ball. Avoid this game. Worth mentioning real quick though that this is a localization of Super Power League, a series in Japan that got 4 games, and they're all pretty much the same. Not that good. Next we have Super Baseball 2020, one of those strange futuristic sports games where you play as men, women, and robots, all with varying strengths and weaknesses. Players earn money depending on how well you play, so you can buy upgrades later. The field is also totally reimagined to have less foul territory. There's a lot of good ideas here, and this is a great 2-player game for sure. Fielding can be a bit problematic as the map doesn't tell you where you are relative to the location of the ball, but Super Baseball 2020 is still pretty good and definitely something different in a genre that needed it. Next we have the Super Baseball Simulator series, starting with Super Baseball Simulator 1000. This is an early Super Nintendo title, and it shows. The graphics and sound are very dated, but the game plays surprisingly well. Hitting, pitching, and fielding are all very accessible, and the game goes by in 10 minutes or so. There's a few sequels on Super Famicom, 2 of which are just clones of the first game with Japanese teams, and 2 others, Ultra Baseball Jitsu Meiben 2 and 3, are slight upgrades in terms of visuals and sound, but I think the original is the best of the bunch. Super Baseball Simulator 1000 is a pretty good pickup if you're looking for something basic. Super Bases Loaded has 3 games for the Super Nintendo. The first is almost exactly like the NES games, with the same viewpoints and same pitching and hitting gameplay, which is perfectly fine. It works well enough. The fielding angle, however, is switched to behind the outfield wall. The second game is totally different, and I think it's the best of the 3 games. The fielding here is really cleverly done. The camera stays fixed on the ball as it leaves the bat. Yeah, it's slow, but it works well. The third game is back to the familiar bases loaded viewpoint and gameplay. It's another pretty good game, typical of the series going back to the NES games, but the second game is the best in my opinion. Super Batter Up was made by the same people who made RBI Baseball for NES, and this might as well be an SNES sequel, because this game pretty much is RBI Baseball for Super Nintendo, and it's every bit as good, too. The same familiar gameplay, good balance, and you can get a 9-inning game done in 10 minutes. Super Batter Up had 4 sequels in Japan, otherwise known as the Super Famista series. They're all pretty much the same until the 4th and 5th games that had a graphical overhaul. But yeah, Super Batter Up is quality. Super Kyukyoku Harakiri Stadium is an oddity because it's the only Super Famicom game that features some American teams in addition to the usual Japanese teams. It's even got real players too, not their names but their likenesses. This is a very good game that cuts a good pace, hitting is fun and fielding is easy. Prepare to give up a lot of runs though. Next is Super RBI Baseball, and I don't understand this because Super Batter Up is way more like an SNES version of RBI Baseball than this game. It's fine on its own, nothing spectacular, although it's pretty hard to get people out. There's real players and real teams and all that, but if you want a Super Nintendo version of RBI Baseball, go with Super Batter Up. Last we have Tecmo Super Baseball, which is a mixed bag. I like the traditional Tecmo mechanic here of matching the other player's choice, just like in Tecmo Super Bowl, but the execution of certain things here is just terrible. Like on defense, the ball is hit and suddenly I'm in the middle of nowhere. Wait, what the hell is going on? It's really jarring. This game could have been good, but that kind of ruins it for me. Brett Hull Hockey. The original game came out in 1994, followed by Brett Hull Hockey 95. This series sounds pretty good on paper. It's got the NHL Players License, so it has real players, as well as a regular season mode, a playoff mode, and the legendary Al Michaels, although you don't hear much from him in the first game. The gameplay in both games is very similar, with the same Madden football-style overhead angle. Seems like that's what they were trying to go for here. However, the action is slow, sluggish, and inconsistent. The AI is dumb as a brick, and you never really feel in control of what's happening. Stuff just sort of happens, and you try and react accordingly. That's no fun. I mean, it's one thing if it's just one game, but it seems like they were perfectly okay with duplicating this mediocre gameplay in the second game without changing a thing. I will say, Al Michaels doing play-by-play in the 95 version is pretty dang impressive. However, these two games overall just aren't worth it. Plenty of good stuff on paper, but the gameplay itself sucks. ESPN National Hockey Night is only slightly better. Similar to ESPN's football game, the draw here at the time was seeing ESPN's television presentation in a video game, hosted by their color analyst Bill Clement. This game is much better than the football game, I'll give it that much. One major reason is that it's 4-player compatible, so that's pretty awesome. The gameplay here is okay. It's better than the Brett Hull games, but not by much. The computer AI is a lot smarter, and you can comfortably do hockey things. One interesting thing here is that you can change the camera angle between horizontal and vertical. Personally, I found the horizontal angle to be a lot more player-friendly. The vertical angle has all this weird zooming, and it makes me feel nauseous at times. Overall, this game is meh, but the 4-player compatibility bumps it up to just okay. Hit the Ice is hockey's answer to NBA Jam. It's an arcade port of a, arcade-style hockey game. This game may not be in the same league as NBA Jam, but it's still really entertaining and laugh-out-loud funny at times. I do have to admit, as an arcade port, it's not very good. The arcade version is light years better. The odd thing about this port is that this game just doesn't feel like a hockey game. You don't feel like you're skating at all. The rink feels a bit too small, and the frame rate is a bit choppy as well. However, this game makes up for its limitations by just being funny as hell. I love the variety of characters that differ from team to team. My favorite is this old bald dude on the New York team. He's like a cartoon Gordie Howe. Hit the Ice is a good example of a game that's not all that great single player, but way more entertaining with the second player. You can either both play on the same team or against each other, as well as set up tournaments. Hit the Ice is pretty good, certainly the only game of its kind on the Super Nintendo, so for that reason, it's worth a look. Next, we come to the series of games that set the standard not just for hockey games, but for all sports games in the 16-bit era and onward, EA's NHL series. Running from 1992, or 93 as the title indicates, to 1997, these games were the crown jewel in EA's then-fledgling sports gaming empire. The Madden games were popular then, but the gameplay just wasn't very good, and it still didn't sniff the Tecmo Super Bowl games, and EA's baseball games were mostly an afterthought. The NBA Live games are pretty good, but EA's NHL games were arguably the best sports games of their time, and hell, to this day, they're still pretty damn awesome. NHL PA 93 was an auspicious start, laying a foundation with a steady vertical scrolling camera angle, quick responsive controls, and subsequent fast gameplay, but they didn't quite get it together yet. They were definitely on the verge of something, though. There's almost a fixed shoot-'em-up quality to the gameplay, with the dodging, hitting, and accelerating, and juking guys out of their skates. And again, the locked vertical scrolling viewpoint is a hugely important factor here. No other game got the viewpoint quite like these games did. NHL 94 was the first game in the series where they absolutely nailed it. It's no surprise that the Genesis version is considered one of the 25 or even one of the 20 best games of its time, and I can't argue with that, seriously. 94 is the first game that works in features like one-timers, shootouts, automatic line changes, and checks where you can send a player into the bench. That's awesome. The further you progress in the series, the more game modes you get, like the practice mode where you can play 1-on-5, that's pretty funny. The graphics and sound get incrementally better, of course, but the overall gameplay remains the same throughout, and I have no issue with that. Why fix what's not broken? Hell, it's not just not broken, it's perfect. I mean, these games still remain some of the all-time great college dorm games ever made. Most stories you'll hear regarding NHL 94 and onward are about skipping class and hanging out in some guy's room, playing an entire 82-game season in a few days. It helps that the 94 edition for Super Nintendo is compatible with up to 5 players. Every game after that is just 4 players, just FYI. But yeah, what makes these games so good is that the gameplay is so immediate and so simple, you always feel in total control, and there's practically zero learning curve. Anybody can play these games and have a good time, even if you don't care about hockey. Hell, these games were so good that EA released a 20th anniversary edition of NHL 94. So yeah, if you want the best hockey games for the Super Nintendo, you can't go wrong with NHL 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, whatever. I will say the 93 edition didn't quite get there yet, but they were still working out the kinks. Every other game, though, is absolute top-notch. My personal pick for the best in the series is the 96 edition. 94 will always be the most popular because it was the first to get it right, but 96 was when they got everything perfect, to the point that the 97 and 98 editions are basically just clones of the 96 edition. Geez, hard to follow that act, but Nintendo gave it the old college try with NHL Stanley Cup, also known as Super Hockey in Europe and Australia. This was a noble effort. They tried something new, but you just can't do a fast-paced game like hockey with this kind of camera stuff. It's just not gonna work. This game is so disorienting to the point that this game gave people serious motion sickness when playing it. The Mode 7 viewpoint is a nice idea, but it worked a lot better in NCAA basketball, which was also developed by Sculptured Software and published by Nintendo. I will say if you manage to get used to the dizzying camera flipping around everywhere, this game is pretty good. The gameplay itself is pretty well done, and you actually feel like you're controlling the game instead of the other way around. It's just really, really hard to get used to spinning around so much. Oh, hold on, I need to throw up. Okay, we're back. Next is Pro Sport Hockey. This game looks generic on the surface, but it's actually pretty dang good. It's made by the same people who did Sterling Sharp End-to-End Football, and that game was also surprisingly good. It's weird to me that so many games here, including this game, have the NHL Players Association license. So yeah, despite the vanilla title, this game does have actual players, and like I said in the football video, that really went a long way toward making a game worthwhile back in the day, because it made it that much easier to imagine your favorite team winning the Stanley Cup. Nowadays, it's just a nostalgia thing. Like, it's nice to see Mark Tenorti's name again, I guess. Anyway, the gameplay here is pretty solid. It's quick without being slippery or jolting, and it's easy to pick up the flow of the game. The one big negative is the sound, which is just awful. There's a pretty funny flaw here though. If you turn off the fatigue mode, you will never ever score a goal, and the game as a whole just turns into a mess. So yeah, Pro Sport Hockey isn't going to sniff EA's NHL series, but it's still pretty good in its own right. Next is Street Hockey 95, and I guess this is hockey's answer to Barkley's Shut Up and Jam. This game tries a little too hard. I mean, am I supposed to know what all this crap means? This is a hockey game, right? Where's the play a frickin' hockey game option? Anyway, the gameplay here is 3-on-3 with a horizontally scrolling camera, and holy crap, the controls are slippery as hell. Half the time I tried to play this game, I was flopping around like a fish on the beach. I just could not get the controls down, they're so bad. I will say they did a great job with the voices here, everything sounds clear as a bell. But yeah, the guts of this game are just not good. There's some nice ideas here, and the game does support up to 4 players. But if you don't get the actual hockey gameplay right, then what's the point? Then we have Super Hockey 94, which only came out in the Europe and Japan regions. This game has more of an international slant, featuring national teams instead of NHL teams. There's some good stuff here, like being able to change what the AI does on the fly. However, the gameplay here is herky-jerky. It's really tough to get a consistent feel, or to even do something as simple as clear the puck from your own zone. The computer plays this game super aggressive, and it can be hard to keep up. And my god, this music is just blaring loud as shit the whole game. So annoying. There are some things to like about this game, but overall, I'd call it a stay away. Well, hey, if it isn't Bob Smith presenting Super Slapshot. And no, Bob Smith isn't an actual broadcaster, he's just some guy named Bob Smith. I'd imagine he's way, way too creepy to get a real broadcasting job anyway. I mean, his face is moving, but there's no sound? What the hell? Anyway, Super Slapshot was made by the same people who made Mario Lemieux Hockey for Sega Genesis, so the feel of the controls and the viewpoint are very similar. No NHL or NHL Players license here though, so you'll have to settle for playing as the world-renowned and feared Egyptian hockey team. Yeah, okay. I gotta say this is a pretty fun game though. It's pretty much the Super Nintendo version of Mario Lemieux Hockey, which is not bad. Last is Wayne Gretzky and the NHLPA All-Stars. This game came out a few years after most of these other games in this video, and it shows because the graphics here are pretty dang nice. One thing casual gamers will enjoy about this game is the just play option, so no messing around with teams or getting confused by options or whatever. This just throws you into a game against the computer, so that's nice. The gameplay is fine. I appreciate the larger, more detailed sprites. That's unique to see in this genre. This game is pretty good, but again, it can't hold a candle to the NHL series.